Okay, so now we are back to back from the last video. So the last thing we were about to do was to run this network to create our looked-at buildings and their bake. So basically, to wedge among our buildings to bake their textures and do a render with their baked versions. So I did that already. Basically, we changed the wedge count from to our total number, and then we just render all thing because we did the test with one building. It worked. Although I just realized it. I mean, when I woke up in the morning, I realized that I forgot to change because we were doing a test, and then on the material, so at the shop level, on the optimized textures, I left the wedge ID at 0, so all my buildings were the same. So that's not to that. This guy was here also. I think it was for the on top of the our building RS proxy. It was always loading building 0 and texture 0. So I just had like 10 renders, 350 frames of the same building. So after I corrected that, I rerun it again, and then it resulted in this cache that I'm going to show you now, which is quite nice, I would say. Where is it? Sci-fi chase, go on, little tutorial, render, building render, building 0. So these are building 0, these are 1K versions, no outside lighting, just baked interior, so which is the one part that takes a lot of time actually. So let's bake. Let's go to another building. That's another one. That's another one. Let's go to another building. I don't know, random. So on and so forth. One other thing before I render these buildings. Actually, that's a good example. We should probably check through those. I went to my Redshift proxy, Redshift render node, and then I turned on these layers: world position, emission, reflections, cryptomatte, and refractions. Why? Because I want to do further look deving in comp to see how I can improve the look of these renders. Because I do have different layers now. I have like just the emission, so I get these guys, whatever is being reflected, which is not very useful because you get the reflect. Because an emission shader, you just see you get everything, but this can be further divided into something more useful. So this is all the reflection from the environment that we're receiving, which is going to be reflecting other buildings, because remember we didn't connect these parts to the shader itself. And then I have refraction, which is literally just what we see through the glass. So that's pretty cool because now we have the position pass as well. And then using the position pass that requires some composing skills, we can do a lot of breakdowns, add some noise using a position pass, but that's not a part of this tutorial. That's more like a comp work, but I suggest you guys just do some googling. That might come very, very handy. So basically using these passes, we can create something a bit more interesting, just so maybe just not every building's light is not more pinkish, but some maybe green, blue, or just some adding random noise or moving lights, etc. And then the cryptomatte is self-explanatory. It's a cryptomatte, so you can. This cryptomatte is set to work with the materials, so it will give us this different materials for the glass, for the baked, and for the unbaked versions, so we can do further comparing. So now the next thing we're gonna do is to replace our scatter environment with our baked versions. So how do we do that? Because if we want to use this only for visualization. So let's go out again. Let's create a new network. So we're gonna call it geometry. and then we're gonna call it buildings RS. We can call this, I guess, we can create a network after, but in my scene it's black because it goes straight to render. So most of the time, if I have something black, that's in my render layers. Do we have a camera? Well, we can start with this camera, or maybe even a further camera. I guess we should probably do something like this so we can render the whole thing. Oh, I see a problem in one of the buildings, so I guess that one needs a clean up, which reminds me we should probably have checked that before baking the textures, but I don't think that's a big problem. We can always go back and adjust it accordingly. So just create a new camera, finds a bit more interesting angle. Okay, let's stick to this for now. Let's bring our mask. This was under, where was this, under geometry? I always lose this one. Guides, where is it? Not here. Scene, no. View. Oh, view might, they moved it. Okay. At work we're still using 16.5, so kind of still getting used to this one. Maybe a little bit more anti-aliasing, so it's not so horrible. And I guess we're just gonna need our terrain. Yeah, that's our terrain, that's fine. So let's turn that on as well. Okay, let's remove the... if you have a strong video card, so this is saying that I'm only gonna show instances up to a certain amount of polygons, which is, I think, at the optimization section, so 40 million. So if I go 100 million, it brings me more of the geometry visible in the report, but slightly obviously slowed down. So okay, we have our buildings, we have our environment. Now let's create our Redshift instancing scene that we're gonna use our proxies that we defined here that we just looked through. So let's dive inside, create an object merge. So what I need now are my original points that I use in the scatter and preview scene, which is pretty much this guy. And let's drag and drop this to, okay, because we're updating constantly, it's slowing down, so I'm gonna put a manual. Let's drag and drop this node to our object merge. Let's go back in so we can hide this now. Let's go back in here. Now basically we need to adjust our instance file attribute. So let's create, because this one originally had a string attribute that was pointing to the BGO files. Now we want to replace those with our proxy Redshift files. So I'm going to hide the others, maybe get some more space here so we can read them a bit better. Yeah, as you can see, we have this printed out here. What we want to replace is these with the proper path. So we can do this in two ways. I guess we can just rename these paths, but we have because we bake them under Geo CT Vols Wedge RX proxy. So these are paths. So let's go Control C, attribute wrangle. I'm gonna unclick this. So let's copy the code from our other scene, or you can just type it. I'm just not gonna redo it again. So this one is fetching the string name from the itself. So right now it would be attribute wrangle here, but that's wrong. So what we need is our proper path, right? So which was not this one, which we copied from here. So it's CT Vols Wedge RS proxy. So I'm gonna rename my file with this folder name, so it's automatically inherited it here, but then I need to copy the previous path. This is completely up to you guys. I mean, obviously your folders may be in different places, so that's what we need to make clear. So I use Linux, so I have media. You'll have like a CD, C or D if you're in Windows. So I'm just gonna cross check that I am loading the correct scene. So I'll copy the result of this output, just paste it here to make sure that I end up in the same place, which I do, so my path is correct. The next thing we need to do is to drop in a Redshift proxy SOP, and we just leave it as it is. If we want to visualize our proxies, we can put a Redshift instance file preview SOP, but we're gonna leave it as it is. Leave the flag here. So now obviously we don't see anything, because we're not displaying our proxies, just the Centroids. And let's select our node here, and let's go Alt Network. Let's create now another Redshift, and let's call it let's call this one City Render. Now let's go into the objects. Let's pin it so we can drag and drop our object, which is this object, which we want to render now. So I want to render building arrays with no lights at all and see if it's actually going to work. For now, and I also don't need global illumination at the moment. We can have some noisy renders, that's fine. Let's save our scene as part 4. Actually, I think this is now the building's finished, so maybe city look dev. Should probably give this a new name. 3 city look dev, and this is gonna be part 1. So I'm just gonna keep that clean. Let's go back to our project folder. And I don't want this file anymore because it's now episode 3. All right, curious to see. I'm gonna hit render. Let's change the camera as well. Cam 1, let's rename it, so it's not Cam 1. We're gonna call it City Look Dev Camera. Okay, I think that's pretty much it. So let's hit render to mplay, and let's see what's gonna come out. And nothing came out. Okay, that doesn't look good. We need to check our settings. Well, yeah, that's because it's instancing. That's my bad. We need to go back to the Redshift object. Even though it's empty, this needs to be set. So use the proxy file. I believe that was the only setting that was required, and it's still not rendering. It is strange. Okay, so we need to debug this further. Now we have an error. It says failed to load the proxy. Okay, I believe we are in the correct path, so let's double check again. Is it the file name? No, this is correct. RS proxy. Oh, it's called RS. Yes, so it's called RS proxy. That's a typo. RS proxy. Okay, let's try again. Actually, I'm gonna go back, turn that off to see if that's gonna work out of the box. Okay, seems to be thinking, and it will start rendering all our buildings with textures. And we're gonna wait. Oh, and it's working. Seems like we baked the Oh yes, but that shouldn't. Oh, that's just a reflection of the lighting. I think we're reflecting too much. Because I was expecting to have something a lot darker here on these edges. It looks like our density is a bit too much as well. Are these all separate buildings? Yes, they are different designs. Yes. Okay. Well, although it looks overly bright, it rendered in 50 seconds, and that's a lot of polygons, as a matter of fact. With the baked walls, I would like to quadruple check the why we have so much light. So let's go back to our city render. Oh, that's because we don't have a light, and most likely we have create headlight on. Hopefully not. That's usually default. This one is somewhere else on the Redshift render scene node. It's maybe under objects. No, it's under Redshift system. Headlight, where are you? Not here. It's not the optimization, not the global overrides. Enable refraction, enable emission, enable refraction. No, not here. We should, I think it's turning on a headlight, which we don't want unless I already turned it off, but I am not sure a default headlight creation has turned it off. Let's try again, because I don't have any lights in the scene, so maybe it's just creating a headlight. Let's turn on the render. And if it does again, we need to then figure out if we actually overlit our baked textures. And that still looks the same. Alright, let's kill the render. Then let's check if baked turntable, if baked textures had the other lights. Yes, that's our problem. We baked our textures with the external lights baked in, then it is plugging in the outside is becoming overly lit. We may need to rebake our textures. Building optimize. I would like to go into the shader actually. Building optimize. This is, but then because we are not baking any textures to ID panels, so because we're using a different shader for this, which doesn't have any texture linked to, but it's kind of copper, so maybe it's just too brightly lit. So let's continue with our terrain as well anyway. So we have our terrain, which we want to optimize as well. We don't want this to waste time converting. So let's create another RS Redshift proxy SOP. Redshift proxy output. I'm going to plug it in here and archive. I'm going to go to my Geo RS proxy here, but I'm going to name it maybe landscape or terrain RS proxy, and let's call it terrain.rs proxy. Yes, and that's not necessary, but we'll leave it. Discard not use attributes, etc., and render to disk. So that should have baked it already. A file 7 megabytes, which is suspiciously small. This is 50 megabytes here. Well, it's compressed. Yes. So let's get this path. Create another geometry node. This can be empty. We just need the RS proxy inside RS proxy SOP, and then because this doesn't change with a variable, we just paste it in the proxy section and just leave it as it is, and we can probably load the mesh. So that gives us the terrain geo, which we will need to probably throw in a texture. So let's call this terrain RS. Okay, this is gonna be dark as well. Probably don't want to just display it for speed reasons, but that's fine. For now we can keep it mesh. Let's go out network. Let's go into our bake textures, not city render, objects. Let's add our terrain as well. So now we need some lighting, which means we're just gonna throw in some lighting. But in order for us to block the lighting, that's gonna be a lot faster. There's a little override we can use in the main Redshift Systems tab, which is called Enable Material Override, and I'm just gonna throw a gray here. And now what we can do is that randomly place some Redshift lights. No, that's not randomly. Let's turn on the scatter and preview. Okay, and if you look up, down, this is our city, right? So, which I think we're a bit on the crowded side. I think we can go less with the buildings just to open up some gaps, but that's up to you. So let's throw in some, let's go to the Redshift tab or your Mantra tab, and then just gonna put some area lights everywhere, pointing up. I want them to point up, so like this, and I want them to go close to the ground. And to be fair, something really big in terms of scale. So if I look from the camera, with far less, let's do a little test somewhere nearby, like this. And then I can play with my exposure or amount here. Let's go 100. So let's this is the, let's call it city light 1. I want that name to go into my city render force lights. I usually use force lights instead of leaving the default candidate lights, because usually I end up with a lot of layers, so this kind of allows me not to make mistakes. It's really helpful. So if I go render to end play, now we should have a gray render with a single light source. Then we can figure out that if it's too dark or not, and it looks like it's too dark. I have something there, but it's barely visible. Okay, that's the other thing that we should definitely check is, because we are displaying this, but we're actually rendering that. So what we can do is, if I put, just want to check the orientation, because like make sure that what I see is actually what I'm rendering. So if I put a blast here, and if I say 0, 1, 2, so it's gonna load 3 points, right? Which are there, those 3 buildings. So then if I copy this guy and go into what I actually render and put the same blast node here, it should be loading the same building. So it's following 408, and in here it's using 408. So then I can go into my building rs and then instance rs instance preview sub. And if I go here, I have these 3. And then if I go mesh, it's going to load what Redshift loads for rendering. So then if I go out, I can overlay this with my BGOs to make sure that what I see is actually what I render. In this case, it looks correct, so that's good. So we can get rid of that now. Okay, and let's go here. Let's get rid of that. So we are rendering what we want to see. Because because if we don't have the same thing, originally I for my look dev I animated the rotation Y, and I didn't realize that the Redshift was actually baking the rotation as well. So every instance had a different orientation. Oh, do we have another broken building here which we need to work on? Maybe, and there is another one. So just let's not forget about it, because it's quite important, I guess, before we continue. We should probably do that, because this is where we bake our buildings. In that case, I'm gonna put a building loader here, and then I'm going to change this because I have 10 of them. I'm gonna investigate each one of them one by one. So that looks correct. this looks correct. Number 3 looks healthy. Okay. Maybe they're all healthy. It's just the display issue then. So we're good. Apparently we're good. So let's go out again. That was an instance error. Okay, so we were checking on our lights. I'm going to this time launch this render with render view, so I can have a real-time feedback. Select crop, city render, city camera, and it's gonna render, and then we can play with our lights. Always on top is on. 2%, 3%. I don't see anything because still rendering. Okay, so maybe now we can go to our light and put like 10 exposure, and I see something, but it feels like it's struggling to reflect. Maybe it's underground. Oh, I think it was. Oh yeah, it was underground. Okay, but now it's too much, obviously. So let's bring it here somewhere. And what we don't want is the visibility of it, and obviously it's too much, so let's go 1 again. Still overblown, so maybe 50, 0, still too much, 10. Okay, I think that's not so bad. It's a bit too strong at the bottom, maybe 5, because we're gonna have a few of those. And give it a different color. I'll give it a sci-fi blue, which works a lot better. Okay, so I don't know if I can duplicate lights, so I'm just gonna while the render view is on, so I'm gonna cancel that, and now we're gonna go city light 2. Let's just have a top view so we can move these lights around just to create some more complex environment. Maybe here or even here, I guess. This could be reddish. Again, this is completely designed, so you are free to change these settings. Maybe something else here, maybe a lot smaller as well, just to get a bit more complexity. Here, let's rotate it. Maybe this one has 3 and even smaller in size. 120, 120, 120. We can change the spread to a lesser value. It's gonna kind of give a bit more like a barn shape. Let's copy these guys and then maybe move them all in different places. Somewhere here, and then maybe this can actually stay there. Yeah, let's put this in here. This one, let's make it a different color again, slightly different blue, maybe red, but not that red, orange-ish. Okay, I think we're gonna need more. This one's here, this one's okay. This one's move. I think we maybe somewhere in the center, different color, different exposure, even like this neon green, maybe tan. Okay, let's look through our camera again, and let's do another render view render. That should look a lot more interesting, but we are gonna need to adjust the intensity, obviously. Hit render. Oh, and this. Oh yes. So the thing breaks, so you need to re-render it. Pretty much, render again. Kill it and render, or relaunch it. I think even. Yes. It just kind of forgets to override. Put it on, and then open render view. So that's the emission, that's the reflection. So our reflection is too bright. Pretty much, we want that reflection to be a lot darker. Please render the gray one. Okay, it's ignoring my override at the moment. Let's try the render and play. Okay, so that's working. However, we didn't add the other lights here. Just another and play. Okay, so I'm not sure about this yellow. I think that's kind of working. That's kind of working. We probably need a little fill as well. So let's put an environment here. We need to play with their environment light as well, but let's hit render. Also, we've been recording for how long? I don't want to overgo. It's only 30 minutes, so we can do another 30 minutes. Okay, so it is possible to do shader overrides without rebaking the material, because we know that our reflection, it's like bronze. That's what we chose. I think we chose the copper preset on the ID panels. So I think it's reflecting way too much information. So now maybe we want to override some of these settings, and we should be able to do that without baking the instances. Well, we can bake the instances. They don't take much time to do so, to be honest, but that's not what I remember seeing on our individual renders that we were looking at, which were here, render, turntables. If I launch one, maybe that's what we are seeing, because that's kind of what I was expecting to see. And I think we have, although I think we had too much lights in this building settings that I have, but we may be able to dim those down as well, because we are driving the amount of lights from building look dev. I think from here, the intensity, the amount. I think this is where we were deciding. So if you have too many points, you know, then we can go lesser amount or more, but that's now what we're gonna fix. Okay, so this is looking already interesting, but I think we need more lights, like I said, and this is without GI. So if I actually turn on the GI, but in the long run we don't want to, because that's gonna cost us a big render time difference, but that should actually look a bit more interesting with it. But these are only the low-res buildings, so if we hit render, so it's already a lot slower. And it is taking quite a while. 2 bounces on the gray render. It is already taking too long, but obviously it feels not much nicer because the color bleeds and it just feels nicer, but you won't see that much of a difference once we have the textures working properly. So let's kill this render. Okay, let's try to get a bit of a bigger picture. So we're going to check our overrides. So I want to do a material override. I can say replace this material with this material, so I can edit it. But in order for this to work, I still need to enable proxy, so these settings become available. So proxy material from proxy, so from object not full override, list overrides, from scene materials, list override. I'm not entirely sure with this part of the redshift, which I'm also quite new, but we can try from object node, from proxy material, from list from obj node, but we are rendering a different level, full override material. Yeah, this I would have to probably go to Redshift settings. So what I'm gonna do instead is I'm gonna go back to, because we don't have to rebake the textures, it's just that our reflective copper shader is reflecting too much, so we want to avoid that. So we can go to which we are doing in lookdev optimized, not baked turntable, because that's where we're rendering the building RS proxy, which is this one, which is using the shaders from here. So what we can do is adjust our shader here and just rebake the proxies, which is going to be quite fast. So let's run the building optimized. Look there, optimized, this one, and I want to remove these slides now. Bake turntable, because we baked those lights as well, so I'm just going to disable these just in case we get to do something more interesting. Let's bring that back for now, but look, they've optimized. Okay, let's render this. Okay, it came out super dark. Building optimized object, building optimized using our this one, because this one is not loading the proper optimized textures, because it's looking for the wedge ID. Unfortunately, then you need to switch that back to 0. If you need to bake it again, don't forget to bring it back. So we are loading. Was this building 02? Yes. Okay. Bake proxies comes here. Building optimized to render, right? Okay, so buildings, no, this is not to render here. Where is the render? Bake proxies. Building look dev to render. Building look dev. Bake proxies. There's a mismatch here. Let's avoid that as well. No, not here, sorry. It's output of the look dev goes into the other network. It's bake proxies. I guess there was a name shift in between. Okay, so if I go back to here, look dev optimized, no files found, because it's looking for a new texture and it's not finding it. Okay, building optimized. Let's go back here. Oh, it's not baked. Maybe that's why. Let's put on auto. Okay, so these are building, and it wants to render these shaders. These parts are baked, and these guys are not baked. So let's go back to out. Oh, because this is looking for a shader that says 0. Still, let's go to shop. It should be here, and this is here. So why is it complaining? Which we need to find out. Look dev optimized, building optimized. Let me render this. Okay, so it's rendering, it's just complaining for some reason. Let me open this with render view. Select rope. Look dev optimized. Render from this other camera, please. Okay, and then I guess we can do progressive. No, I'm gonna turn this off. We're gonna do progressive. We can select the little section. I almost want like this area to come dark, so when I put a proper light, it kind of does what it's supposed to. So if I put like an environment light, it's just reflecting too much, I think, right now. If I re-render this, I guess this one is not strong enough. Let's go to the shader now. Shop. So it's inner walls, panels. So let's try it for now. Plastic. Okay. And let's go 1, 1, 1. And now if I put a light there in the scene, force lights, environment, go to environment light, where's our environment light? Here, crank it up. Okay, so that's kind of reacting properly to the light now. So I think let's leave it like that. And also these rims, I'm not so happy about, which were called ID frame, but we do want some reflectivity, right? So we should probably just keep it like aluminum maybe. That's still very reflective, so let's go maybe 0.25 and more roughness, I'll say. Give it some color. No, this is becoming too reflective again. Let's go back to plastic. Let's go back to 1, 1, 1, and then it is still reflective. It's just the roughness is too much, so too low. So let's give it a bit roughness. IOR 1.5, and this is our color. That's fine. That was the ID frame. So I want to do that again. I want to give it a bit more shiny, this one, so when the camera turns we can get something more interesting, I guess. So let's go, I guess again, plastic. This one we can call it, give it a different color, and then give it some roughness as well, 0.4. I'm going to restart this render. I'm not sure if it's picking up the other changes, but now maybe it's better. Office lights. These are office lights, but this is the part that we bake, so it goes there, so we can't just change that so easily, although we can change the amount. We can manipulate the geometry here if it's too bright, and then rebake it, so it just becomes like a shader time override instead of rebaking the texture. These reflections, we don't want any reflections on these layers. The emissive ID floor is baked, that goes in there. ID gloss goes in there. I guess we can decrease the, no, that's probably okay. Okay, so let's kill this render. Let's go in OBJ. And I guess what I want is to just update this section, but I don't want to re-render, so I'm just going to disconnect, and I'm just going to, this is bake all proxies, bake all textures, this is the proxy output, so I'm just going to dirty this and cook again. That should go quite fast. It should give me new proxies. With it up to date. Okay, they are coming slowly. Okay, I'm gonna pause the video and I'll be back once this is done. It shouldn't take more than 2-3 minutes. Okay, so welcome back again. Last thing we were checking was how we were gonna get these textures balanced. So we're playing with the shaders, this and that. So I did play a bit more in between just to get a bit closer, because since this is a very big tutorial, we every now and then just get different results, so things start looking different. Well, I could probably stick to the files a lot better, but honestly, this is where it's a bit more interesting because we end up problem solving. So now I'm going to do a little render, and I added a few things. That's why I will have to go back in between and then show them what was done in the file, obviously, so you guys can do the same things. I'm going to show how to do the advertisements and then the buildings we already did, the terrain as well. I think for the terrain, I just want to make sure that we did have a shader. I think at the moment we don't, because we bake it, but it comes out really shiny. So I'd like to assign a shader to the terrain as well, which I think we had the RS landscape. This is, which we can select it here. It's just a regular RS material. I'm just gonna give it I'll start with plastic 0.5. I really don't want any reflection, or just let's say 0.35, but big roughness, so it does reflect some light. And then while this is assigned, I can rebake my proxy. It will copy that selected shader into the file, into the proxy file. So let's go outside again. We're gonna do a little bit fog, which I'll come to, but I'm not using it at the moment. So this is the building advertisements, which will come there as well. But for now, what I want to show is if I hit render with the buildings and the advertisements and the terrain, I'll show you a result of how far we are from where we need to get to. Yes. So let it cook for a second, and as the scene gets heavier and heavier, obviously it's getting slower and slower. So right now we are missing Atmos, and it feels like we have too much light on the light that are turned on the buildings, and it also feels like our advertisements are a tad smaller compared to what I had in my promotion video. So now what I want to show you is the raw render from, it should be CTGO, it should be here. So that's the CTGO. If I open up the raw render, we're gonna see how far we are from where we should be. I think we can get a closer render of our buildings. That's what I'm going to do. Let's get a bit better camera angle that represents kind of what we are doing here. I guess something like this. He's gonna justify better. Oh, now I look here, I do notice that we need to randomize our orientation quite a lot. So we probably should do that as well. But let's get the similar camera angle like I said, because it seems like we forgot to randomize our orientation after we instanced them. So they're instanced regularly. Let's do that so that we have a camera angle like this, I think, in that render. Something along these lines, yeah, something like this. Let's leave it as it is, and then I'm gonna move this out. Just let's do a little randomization before we continue, which means we need to randomize our buildings here and apply the same randomization there. So if we look here, like this group is all aligned. So let's put a attribute randomize, I would say, let's call this, we should have had orient, maybe we remove them, we don't, okay, that's probably why. So let's call this orient. I guess we could do normal as well, and then we have a set value. Orient is a 4 float, and everything is broken now obviously, so we need to go 0 0 0, find our up vector, and then on the second attribute, I think one of these should give us a bit more random, not the third option. Yeah, it's kind of not. I'm just gonna make sure that we will have some difference, not at the moment. Yes, okay, so now everything is a bit mixed up, which should give us a bit more realistic result, which means look there, camera city, look there, which means we need to apply this everywhere so we don't get surprise alignments between what renders and what displays. Okay, so let's do another render. This time we're a bit closer. So in this render that results in the if we find out, if I open the if I open the video, the moving version, which we can have a look here. Obviously, at the moment we don't have traffic, we don't have comp, we don't have volumes, and we don't have the environment city lights. So that's what we need to get back in our renders. But if you look at our render view, we are not actually that far. We need to randomize our lights a bit more. I think we have too many lights that are turned on, and then I think we could use some more bigger advertisements, and we need our city lighting. Like as we can see, we have some green here, we have some blue here, here and there. And the other thing that I would like to introduce is the detail we had on the edge of the buildings, and obviously the traffic itself. So all those little blue lights that are catching highlights is the one, and then the red are the one obviously doing a lot of improvements on the scene, and the green over there. So that's what we need to work on, and the bump map on the edge. So that's probably what we can add as well. So which means that we need to go back to our look dev, so we can capture all these reflections a bit better. But that's for that to work, we need to, I think, get back to the look dev a little bit more. So let's do that. Let's go back into the building look dev. Make proxies. Let's turn this on because this is what we were rendering. I'm going to go to building look dev camera and focus on our buildings. And this time I want to render this with the advertisement as well. So let's get back to our redshift. Let's go object level, maybe turn off the scatter and ads. We can turn off the terrain as well. These guys, I guess, so we don't need the points. So this is our first building, and these are advertisements. I want to now go back to, I'm going to divide this screen in two, so I have a quick access to my out network, and it's basically, this is where we were baking the textures, but I'm just going to turn off, like I was doing the test, bake render map. I'm going to turn this off, turn on the building optimized, because this is what it renders just before it gets baked. And we're gonna have the advertisements on. So let's put the let's select our texture, and then let's make sure that we have what we want to render. It's building look dev and building ads and building optimized. Sorry, building optimized, not look dev. And hit render. This is the baked texture. Still using the baked textures. Still not using. Oh, and then now it's because the shader is that specific texture is the texture is still set to the ID wedge. So please go back to your shader and select the optimized textures, and this is because asset 1 it's gonna be texture 0. This is asset 0, so it's gonna be texture 0. Let's render it again. Out, render templates. It's gonna load the textures. So like I said, we had a lot of lights on situation here, so we need to deal with this somehow. We could probably bake the render, bake new texture with the less amount of points, or we could probably try to do something smarter with this. One of the things that, let's let this finish the rendering first. We have global illumination on. I was testing it, I guess that's why it's taking a bit longer. 44 seconds. Let's do a render now. Okay, because from here it doesn't feel like it's that bright, but I think when we put like 100 of these, it does become quite bright. So I want to test this with an area light to see that if I get the same effect. I'm gonna remove the camera and we're looking roughly here. Let's put a little area light on this section from Redshift light, RS light. And let's make sure that's big enough. Okay, and I want that to be, I don't know, blue. And if I hit render again, I believe I need to add that light to my forced lights, which is this light. Render. Okay, I'm going to switch to render view so I can look at the building and select crop, bake textures, render, because I want to be able to play with my settings live and to change the values. Select our temporary light. I don't see my run. Okay, there it is. Okay, 10, 5. Okay, so I want to add this bump map thing here and then give it bring back the little bit shininess. So now we can work on that. Let's go back to the shopnet. Let's dive inside. This blue section was our ID ID panels and ID frame. So let's work with ID frame first. Maybe give it a I don't know. Let's go platinum, so it kind of gets that shiny look. I think that's fine. So ID panels. Yeah, I think we can maybe give it a little bit of weight and a little bit more roughness, I suppose. Okay, and then let's select our ID panels, and I'm just going to experiment with different settings here. Aluminum, I think this was getting too much brightness, too much shine. Maybe silver again, but I think we just need something shiny. Maybe we want a shiny so try copper. I think copper is pretty interesting. I don't know why it didn't work before. I think it was just getting too much diffuse. A little bit more. I think maybe that's too much. Let's go 2. Okay, so we got some more maybe a touch less reflection. Okay, now what I want is let's change the light color to see how it's gonna reflect, how it's gonna react. Okay, that's a bit better. Let's add some detail now by let's diving inside. I need to allow editing of contents and dive inside, go inside the Redshift botnet. So I have this material here, so I want to create a bump. So I'm going to create an RS bump map and plug this guy to the here, and then I have my texture, which is going to be a noise. I think we can use a free texture from the internet for this one. So let me pause the video and then just find something a bit more interesting. I actually completely forgot I already did that because it was in the other folder. So if you have a look, this is just a texture you can find on the internet. It's quite small. We're just going to tile it quite many times. It's just a panel. It's just a free texture that you can find on the internet. Just search for sci-fi channel textures or something. So in order for us to see that if this is working, no, but we did remove the UVs from those sections, so now that's going to be a problem. We may have to go back and create our UVs. So otherwise we'll have to use a 3D texture again, because we don't have our UVs anymore. Okay, well, I guess then let's start by a noise. We wonder if Redshift has patterns like boxes and spheres like Mantra has. Volumes, I don't think it does. There's the tree planner. Well, we can use that one. Textures, there is no wireframe curvature. Output matte materials, light shaders, there's nothing preset like that. So we can try the tree planner node and just project the same thing over and over maybe, and that should kind of do the trick. Let's focus on a single section. Let's go to our building camera. Let's zoom in maybe to a panel here, I guess should do. Okay, so I guess it is working, but they're very small. So let's select section here. So get a little speed up. And I guess now we need to scale our coordinates. Or make them actually smaller. Yeah, it's kind of working. Definitely working. It's kind of breaking up the edges, although I can't really tell how much it is working. Maybe need to get a bit closer, like this, so we can have a little faster render. Yeah, it's working, it's just too strong. So let's go on the bottom map, height scale, let's put it to 2.1, still too strong. 0.05, still too strong. 1, and kinda working now. I wish we could do the displacement, but that would be, I think, quite heavy. Let's go 5. So instead of something like this, so we have now something like this, which is gonna be much more interesting, obviously. The other thing we can do then is to get, since we're using triplanar, we could probably just get another texture to use against this, just to make it a bit more interesting. So let's try world space, because we're gonna be using, probably world space will be better, because we're gonna instance it, projection space. That shouldn't matter. I don't know which one would make a difference. Let's go maybe smaller, 0.05, 0.05. So it's kind of like something readable there, which is a lot more interesting, I would say, because we are actually super close. So if we zoom back, we start getting something more interesting visible. There's a section here, it'll be interesting to see. Yeah, maybe even bigger. So if you go bigger in size, we can increase the amount, I'll say. More than that is probably gonna break. So let's go, this one, maybe this one before that, so we don't get it on the sides. I think it's quite interesting. We should have probably put in something at the walls as well, but so the baked results would look a bit more interesting. But I guess with the amount of since we don't have any furniture and our glass is a bit more well, actually, if we go back into our, so let's zoom out a little bit more on this, just to make sure that we have some more interesting result already. Yeah, well, everything looks a bit more sci-fi. We probably could add a little bit of on the glass shader, because our glass is not baked as well. So if we go out and go to our glass shader, I think we could add a little bit of roughness. Well, this is because the IOR is 1, it's set to 1.5, and it's linked. So this should return no roughness, and this should pretty much roughen up all our glass. So there's no glass here then, there's the glass on the inside. That's very strange. Oh, there's no glass there, there's a glass here. Oh, because it was not linked. Well, let's make it in wall. So if I go down, yeah. But obviously we shouldn't have too much roughness on the glass. We should probably just break it. But I'm afraid that the problem with this is that it's gonna it's gonna generate noise, and it's gonna slow down our renders. But it probably does add a little bit more realism, kind of like a fake Atmos. Kind of add like a blur as well, since our resolution is quite low. I'm not sure, but I think I'm gonna keep this at something maybe very low. Okay, let's keep it that way. So if I look at it like this, it's kind of working. I think I'm a bit more happy with this current result. I still think we have too much interior lights. In the optimized texture, I did modify it a little bit. So what I'm doing now is that this was our original texture, so I thought that was a lot bright. So I plugged in a RS noise, start playing with the settings. As you can see, it's kind of creating darker excuse me, it's creating kind of like a darker areas, just a noise because if you look at that, so maybe I can use that to actually multiply and get really dark areas. This one is, I need to find a better noise, so, because I really don't want to rebake my texture, but this is way too organic, so that's my problem with it. Complexity, if we increase the complexity maybe, and possibly change the size a bit more to get bigger, darker patches. So something like this. Oh, this is maybe 0.3. Okay, noise, complexity is fine. And then maybe if I can get a bit more darker areas like this. It's just that it's not every floor, so it's a bit weird, to be fair. So just maybe just fluctuate the values a little bit. It might help. And then, so but that was just the noise. So that's the result from this to this. It just breaks things up a bit more. And then I have an ambient occlusion node here, kind of creates a little occlusion. It's plugged into emissions, that's why it looks a bit strange, but this might be actually slowing down our renders as well. So I'm just gonna ditch that as well. I don't think it's helping so much. The other, this is not required anymore. So the other thing that I plugged in here is on like a hue parameter, because I want to, if I disable that, I want to shift this color, so I have like a green hue, orange, yellow, pink, blue, green. So by just shifting the hue of the shader, I can get some different mood of the building, right? So I want to use that. So that's for, in order for me to use that, what I want to do is, I'm going to stop this so I don't want to crash it. I'm going to create a constant here. Constant. RS constant. Can I plug constant here? No, it's the, because I want to plug in this float default. That's not how I want it. I want to RS constant. Redshift. Noise negative. How do I plug in integer user data vector? How do I link like this? That's a file name. So what is this? Then I can create an integer here, edit parameter. Let's drop an integer, let's say wedge ID. So I want to plug this into the shader, right? So I'm gonna copy this, which is gonna be wedge ID, but for now it's gonna be 0. I'm gonna copy this value, go into the optimize textures, and I'm gonna plug it in here. Okay, so then if I change the wedge ID, we're gonna get different hues. So now what we can do is that let's go back to OBJ. Let's go back to our building look there, because that's where the buildings are being changed. This is the attribute, right? So we can go back to first the shader that we changed the value from. And then we can go down to our other shader and put the same thing again, and finally bake out the new proxies. So let's bake the proxies now. One thing that we still might have to do is to actually reduce the number of lights and just rebake the textures, or probably that's gonna be easier than just going through the textures and removing them in Photoshop or Nuke or something. So which is not very ideal. Okay, so let me pause the video again, and once the these textures are out, the new proxies are out, we're gonna create the new proxies for the floating advertisements. So then we can start a little bit of a quick hack of an Atmos and some area lights to give some more interesting look to our city. Okay, so this building is now big, so let's go and do a little pass for our advertisements. No, I mean like this all the proxies have been baked, so let's do our advertisements. So last time we left with the advertisements, it was at this section. So we did create these advertisements, and then we did create these proxies. So now what we want is to bake the point cloud as proxy with the attributes baked in. So in order for us to do our turner table, we brought our building ads in this our ad network in here, and then we remember the instance files, which has a path to our instances that we baked. So what I want to bake, but is that this is because this is per building, right? This is now showing the advertisements for building 0. And what I want, and these are the points. So because we can bake geometry and point clouds that has the instance file attribute in the same instance. So like if I load the proxy that has these points, it's going to actually instance them onto these points. I don't need to bring in points and then point the files to it's like the baked in, it's gonna work. So what I'm doing now is that instead of using the geometry, I'm loading the points, which already has information for what to instance. And where was I? Building advertisements here. But what I'm also doing here is that because I noticed that during my tests, I noticed that hey, all the buildings were, all the advertisements, they all looked at in random places, but they all looked like they were looking towards the same direction. It was because we never created a random value for them. And so then I just took this wedge ID value once again, and I put in the global seed, and I put it in the scale seed, and I put in the orient seed. So now every time we get the some building has changed, every orientation gets randomized. And then the last thing we were looking at was that it looked like the scale was a bit too small, so I'm just going to increase this p scale value, and then I am going to go into my ROP network. So because I was playing with the textures, I had to disable my bake all texture. If you didn't touch it, it will ignore and it will not sense a difference. But if you did change something while I was messing with my files, I just disabled, because now if I just try to bake new proxies, it will try to bake the textures, which I don't want to do it. And now the other thing is that so because originally this is how this was, because this was fetching a proxy output node, so I copy pasted it and named it to bake add proxies, pointed it to building adds redshift proxy output, which is here, which is for baking my points that is coming from our instances in the building lookdev. So let's go back, and then obviously the file name I choose to put is, again, just trying to keep things consistent, city walls wedge rs proxy, city adds rs proxy. So I have these guys, which I'm gonna run again now because I changed the size of the file. So go back into bake render, right click, delete selected. It should, sometimes it loses the connection, it doesn't delete, sometimes it does delete these files. I'm gonna delete them manually now. and I'm gonna right click and quick select that, so it's gonna start populating this folder. So let's just wait a little bit. It should go fairly quick. It should be. It seems like this one is doing those files one by one, although there is this override. Where is my folder? Okay, it's going. This is they're all same size. I need to make sure that I did not change. Still have it, right? Yes, but roughly they're the same point count, so I don't think that's going to change much regardless. Yeah, they're different. Okay. If we investigate exactly, not this guy. There's some differences. Okay, I think it's finished now, or there's one more to go. Okay, so it's finished. So now I'm gonna look through the city look dev again. We can turn this off. Hopefully this and this. The other thing I think I would like to check is before rendering so many of them, you can just put a blast and then say just render 0.0. Say 0.01, take it and put it in the same part here, because they should be matching points. And then if I go out network, go to city render, building as, environment render, terrain, and then if I say render, it should render on the two buildings and their corresponding advertisements, properly oriented and randomized. Am I asking too much? No. Okay, so that's one building. These are not the best sections, but it's already, to be fair, looking a lot more interesting than what it was looking. Okay, let's then disable our test blast objects. So now the thing we can do is out city. I can't get the lights from my older scene because my buildings are in different places, but we can explain how to do this fog layer, obviously. So what we want to fetch, is our scatter and preview instance 1 node with an object merge into another node. So just so we can get some bounding boxes pretty much here. Scatter and preview instance. Just want to use the bounding box pretty much. And then if you plug in a box node, okay. If you plug in a box node, it's gonna give you the bounding box, and kind of like offsetting it 50 units up, converting it to a VDB by voxel size of 4, which is giving me 20 million voxels. For this purpose, it's enough. Now I'm using a volume WOP, which I'm going to explain what I'm doing here now. Okay, so if you dive inside, so I have my global input, volume globals in volume WOP 1. Then we can plug in a relative to bounding box from position to position, and then we can plug the output into a vector to float, and then we're using the Y component of this vector to create a fall off map based on, so I can create a little fall off on Y axis. So I just have two turbulent noises that are plugged into position, and I have two ramp parameters plugged in, and then there's a few multiplications happening here. This is at this stage, I believe I don't need to explain what we're doing here. We're just multiplying a ramp with a turbulence and here and there I just put like a multiply constant because I wasn't happy with this value. I can do the same thing here. Like I can get the I can just dial down the numbers here. This is not really a very restrictive design. You can do this in, it's like literally like a math, and then I get the output of that turbulent noise and get multiplied with another turbulent noise. Then I ramp that again with a ramp called ramp2, and then I multiply that with an attribute here, input number 1. It's just, this just creates like a, just multiply my just use my current position and create a density out of it, pretty much using the bounding box. I just say like create a turbulent noise and multiply it, because if I, let's say if I disable these guys, the output will be completely different if I bypass them. I'm not bypassing him at the moment. It's this guy. It's this guy. It should be the bypass. So like I still have the ramp, but I don't have the noise. It's very straightforward. There are 100 ways to do noise up volume. Then like I was multiplying my density somewhere, and now I'm multiplying my density outside with a volume warp. You can manipulate primitive fields with volume warp like I'm doing here. F at density times equals 0.2. So if that was the density was 1 here, now it's 0.2. And then if that's not enough, I'm using a cloud noise node from Houdini Shelf tool to noise it up even more, because it just gives a bit more interesting result. I might say that this is a little bit of an overkill. I could probably use the cloud noise from the very beginning, but that's not really anything interesting, to be fair. Okay, so if I look through my city look dev, turn on my instances so I can see them in the viewport, so I got something like this. So I'm going to turn that off. We're gonna now do a render, and we're gonna add some lights on probably the gray version, so we can render really fast, and then see how our city reacts to lights. So we are trying to get somewhere close to what I had in my older render, which I think I lost the folder path, copy pasted too many things. So let's wait for this to resolve, a few frames, a few buckets. I guess the bump map is giving a hit now overall to the overall speed of our render and randomized hue shift, but it's already looking a bit more complex, to be fair. But I guess the more we simplify things, the faster it will be, but the less cool it will look. So I guess that's something we can live with. Well, it did had a big impact on the render time. Did I turn on something accidentally? No, that's cool. No, I don't have any global illumination, but it does look a lot cooler, especially when it's moving. It's gonna look better. Okay, so the advertisers are working, the floors are working, the reflections are working, and we're happy. So I'm going to now stop this render. And then we're gonna try to put some area lights and then make that work with the fog, which we render the fog separately from our render anyway, and we comp that on. And then we can get to our traffic, so we add a little bit of life. Right after that, that will be the conclusion of our city preparation. And we'll have a functioning sci-fi city. Okay, so now we can go back to our city render node, And under systems, let's enable material override. And I know, well, I think we can get a bit of a better view. So if we lock the camera, get something like this maybe. So we can place our lights interactively, which means I guess we can then drop in an RS light. Let's say here, and it's kind of reacting already. But I don't think the representation is actually accurate, so let's just make that bigger. As you can see, it's not really doing anything. And now we want it bi-directional, and the way we want to replace them is I think vertical between the streets, not so close everywhere, because it's gonna burn in a lot of it's gonna make like stronger light. You do want to increase the contribution scale of the volume to like, I don't know, something like 0.5. We don't want them to spread 100%, so we want something like this. But now what we need to do next is, like, let's go back to our light, right? Let's, what was a random light? I guess this one. We can go, and let's call it city illuminate. Yeah, city lights 01. I think we're gonna have like 5-10 of these, so it's better if we keep it that way. Now select the city render node, and let's open the render view, and let's disable selection. We go to look dev camera, and let's select our ROP network, which is city render, and it's gonna render everything gray, I believe. That's if, unless it breaks again. It should render everything gray. It looks like it's gonna ignore. Maybe it's the render view here. Unless it's in the bucket mode, it probably maybe doesn't care. So let's turn on the bucket mode and try, because I'm pretty sure if I go render template, it's gonna render gray. So let's see if the bucket mode versus progressive mode is something to do with this option. It is kind of slow. I'm suspicious. I don't think it's working. Just gonna wait. Just gonna be patient a little bit. See if it's actually working or not. If you're getting anything gray or not. And this one has the global illumination on as well. No, there's no global illumination here. Okay, so why is it taking so long? Because because it's ignoring. I think that's a bug that I should probably flag to Redshift developers. So, well, okay, I'm gonna close the Redshift render view, and then we're gonna do the same test with until we press the things too many times. So let's save it. Look there one. Is this our correct file? Yes, we're still on look there one. Then we can, I guess, let's try the play. Like I said, let's see if this is gonna do the right thing. Please do, because I need this gray. It's the render faster. Enable material override. This should work. Yes, it's rendering gray now. That's what we want. So we can actually sort of see if our lights are working. Well, right now there is only environment light, and I don't want that also. So I'm gonna select city lights 1, hit render again, so I can get some light at the center. Maybe after I figure out my intensity level, then I can start duplicating them around. Obviously, you guys can see that that's a little too much. So let's leave this on top. Let's pin this guy so we can press the button. Let's find our light. And I think default is 100, so I guess that's too much. We want 10. Hit render again. That's probably still too strong. Around here we want something lighter. So let's go maybe 5, because remember we're gonna have like 10 of these. Okay, so I'm gonna select the city lights again. Light, I don't want this to be bi-directional, that's fine. 0.9. Okay, so let's duplicate and figure out some nice locations for light. You can play upside down, just change orientation. They're bi-directional, so it's shooting both sides. You can also scale them in different places. Where's my fourth one? Is here. I'm missing one. Number 1. Number 1 is always here. Well, we can move the number 1 now. It's replaced by a number something else. Yeah, a little bit like this. I don't know. Let's select all of these 4. Let's move them some other places. Maybe this one goes there. So now pretty much practice the same thing. Don't put 50 lights. Find some nice locations for your own lights that kind of is cool. Later we're gonna change it anyway, because we want to do a little bit artistic lighting based on our path, the flight path for our the simulation part when we start that section. So obviously we're gonna, if you're gonna use 50 lights, we want that computation to go where it matters. So so we don't choke the PC with places that we are not interested, because we may be flying from here and there and then maybe turn back, so we don't have so much here, this and that. So let's see if there's an overlap here too. No, there's no overlap here. Is it there here? 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. One of them is overlapping. So do a few renders, see what you like, and then we'll continue from there with the fog and some adjustments.